Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Essential Elements of a Successful Business. My name is Michelle Eisenberg, and I am a program assistant at the NASDAQ Entrepreneurial Center. And for those of you who may not know, the NASDAQ Center is a nonprofit building a better path for entrepreneurs worldwide by improving inclusion, access, and knowledge in entrepreneurship. So as you will see in the chat in a moment, the NASDAQ Center provides programs, resources, and exceptional mentorship to entrepreneurs across all races, industries, and geographies. So definitely make sure to check out those links and resources in the chat. And then just a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. First, let us know where you are dialing in from in the chat. And second, we're going to open up for a live Q&A at the end of the event. So please make sure to submit your questions for us in the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen throughout the presentation, and we will try our best to get to all of them. And of course, none of what we do could be possible at the center without all of the amazing support from our sponsors, including NASDAQ, Lehigh University, Bank of the West, Airbnb, KPMG, Wilson Sonsini, Woodruff Sawyer, Microsoft Entrepreneurship for Positive Impact, BPM, and HubSpot for Startups. We are humbled by their contributions and hope you are grateful too. Awesome. New York, New Jersey, Louisiana, San Fran, Iran, Tennessee, Georgia, Maryland, DC. Welcome, welcome, everyone. So great to have you all here. Texas, Nashville. Awesome. All right. And so before we get started, we always like to launch a few polls just to step back, see how everyone is doing today. So this first poll is going to ask, how are you feeling? Fearful, anxious, surviving, or optimistic? Give it a few moments for everyone to think about it and submit a response. Thank you always for participating. Awesome. Nevada, New York, Manitoba, California. Welcome, everyone. All right, I'm going to end this poll and share these results. Looks like optimism is in the lead. Always like to see that, but we do have some feelings of anxiety and surviving. So hopefully some of what we talk about will help some of those feelings. I'm going to stop sharing this poll and launch the second poll. What is keeping you up at night? Finance, sales, marketing, scale, pivot, team, or surviving? This one tells us a little bit about your current entrepreneurial needs so we can continue providing relevant content to all of you. Thank you again for participating. I'll give it a few more moments. All right, I'm going to end this poll and share these results. Finance in the lead, sales and marketing coming up behind, but we have some all across the board. We will take this into account as we continue developing programming for all of you. I'm going to stop sharing this poll. And without any further delay, please join me in giving a warm welcome to our special guest, Marcus Whitney, founding partner of Jumpstart Health Investors. Marcus, it is so great to have you here, and I'm going to hand it right over to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Michelle. Really happy to be here. Sunny Friday here in Nashville, and I saw a couple of Nashville friends in the chat. So hello to you and hello to everyone from around the world. We're going to dig right in. So I'm going to share my screen. Give me just 1 second to get that done. All right. I think we are good. So we're going to dig into something that I have come up with called the 8 core concepts. And I'll tell you a little bit about myself. And as I do that, I'll explain to you why I came up with this. So a little bit about myself. So first and foremost, we're all entrepreneurs here or aspiring to be entrepreneurs. So I am an entrepreneur. I'm a college dropout and I'm self-taught. So basically everything that I know about entrepreneurship, I may have learned from books or Googling or things like that, but not in a university setting. So not from any curriculum that was focused on teaching people how to be entrepreneurs. My my background and career spans being an active technologist, so director of technology of a fast-growing email marketing company. As Michelle mentioned, I'm founding partner of a venture firm that's focused on early-stage healthcare investing called Jumpstart Health Investors. We've been operating for 8 to 9 years now, and we invest all across the United States, largely investing in healthcare, technology, tech-enabled services, and consumer health and wellness businesses. I also am a co-founder and a minority owner of Major League Soccer's Nashville Soccer Club, which is our team based here in Nashville. And outside of those things, I also sit on the boards of numerous nonprofits, as well as some other for-profit companies, a bank that's based in Salt Lake City called Celtic Bank that actually is a very large SBA lender, so very focused on supporting entrepreneurs through that, and several other technology companies. So I worked through lots of different mediums and lots of different positions. I've been an operator, been a technologist, been an investor, been a board member, and as I was going through my own personal journey of figuring out how entrepreneurship works, with not that much mentorship, because we didn't have all these incredible tools and platforms like the NASDAQ Entrepreneurial Center when I was getting off the ground, I ran into a lot of walls. I made a ton of mistakes, and a lot of it just had to do with me not understanding all of the different aspects of a business. And one analogy I want to sort of relate this to is a house, right? So everybody can purchase a house, but not everybody can build a house. And building a business is pretty similar to building a house insofar as you have to know everything from the topology of the land to how you're going to lay the foundation to all of the different resources you will need, the raw materials, the technology, how to establish the foundation, the framework, the plumbing, the insulation, the electrical, the ventilation, how to meet all of the codes, how to work with the city on all the different paperwork that you need, ultimately building it so that it's safe, it's energy efficient, it's beautiful. You have to do all of that. And then it has to be sturdy if it's going to actually appreciate in value over time. Now, everyone understands this about houses, but they don't necessarily make the same connection when it comes to businesses. And that's because a business doesn't have this sort of physical structure to it. It's, this conceptual thing that is part of a lot of different people, some technology, people are buying from it, people are selling through it, et cetera, et cetera. But a business, I want you to think about it a lot like a house. It's a structure. It's something that has to be crafted. And in order to be a business person, an entrepreneur, you don't have to do every single thing in building a house, but you have to understand fundamentally all the things that go into building a house. So I was never a house builder, but what I was a software developer. And building software is somewhat similar to building a house in terms of all the different things you have to consider when you're building a solid piece of software that's going to, over time, appreciate in value. So when I wanted to finally figure out how to reliably and consistently build new businesses, I realized I needed that same framework, and I looked around and I didn't really find one. And so that is why we are going to go through the 8 core concepts. So the 8 core concepts is a novel framework to understand, in my opinion, how all businesses work. At Jumpstart Health Investors, we've invested in almost 150 businesses. Like I said, I've been on the boards of many different types of businesses, which is important because you want to sort of understand what's consistent when many things are going to be different from type of business to type of business. So I tried to create the 8 core concepts to be a novel framework that would be consistent across all businesses. I want to talk a little bit about software development. Some of you may be familiar with how to build software, some of you may not be, but just follow along with me for a second because this will give you some sense of how I created the rules for what I was going to develop in the 8 core concepts. So, when software developers are building software, what they're trying to look for are what are the things that are always needed, right? What are the things I have to do every single time I build an application? And if you have to do it every single time, you don't want to do it from scratch every single time. There's no reason to do that. So what software developers do is they create frameworks. You may or may not have heard of some of these frameworks: Ruby on Rails, Django, Express.js, Angular. There are many more, Symfony in the PHP world. there are many of these frameworks, but what's important to understand is the reason why these frameworks exist and the reason why they're so popular among software developers is they take the most commonly always needed aspects of software and they basically take care of it for you. So you don't have to do those things from scratch every single time, okay? But you have to know what those things are. It's really, really important that you know what those things are. So what frameworks let software developers do is focus on what is unique about their app. That's kind of why I created the 8 core concepts to help entrepreneurs focus on what's unique about their business and not try to think from scratch every time about what are the most consistent things every single business is going to need. So important things about frameworks. Frameworks are made up of 2 very important things to keep in mind: concepts and contexts. Okay, so we're going to go through some of the concepts that will normally appear in software development. So authentication. You all have apps on your phone. Those apps will ask you to log in, right? And what's happening on the back end is you put in your username and your password, you submit them. It's checking against some database to make sure that actually matches what's correct for your account. If it matches, it lets you in. If it doesn't match, it tells you you have the wrong password, right? So that process, that is called authentication. That concept is called authentication. Navigation, getting from one place in an app to another place. That's a concept. Sessions, as you're progressing through an app, you want the app to keep track of what you've done, from minute to minute. That's called sessions. Security, right? Obviously, we all want our apps to be secure. We don't want other people getting access to our sensitive data. So there's a security aspect. Data storage. These are all things that we don't think about as users of software, but every single software developer has to think about these things, right? So frameworks will have ways to support software developers in taking care of all of these different aspects. Another thing is frameworks have an order of operations. So going back to the house example, right? You're not going to build the entire house and then try to wire it with electricity, right? There's a certain phase in the building of the house when it's time to wire the entire house. And then you can start to put the drywall and other things like that up, right? So it's important to know the order of operations. Some things have to go before other things. Okay, this is really, really important. So we have concepts and then we have order of operations, and frameworks will will connect those concepts logically. Okay, so it's going to say there's a certain level of security when you're authenticating, and then once you're past the authentication, now there's another level of security. So there's a logical order to the way that it's going to connect all of those different concepts. At the end of the day, you want the framework to be as simple as possible. So I tried to do that as well. And so let's now dig into the 8 core concepts with these basic sets of rules that I stole from the software world, which is we have concepts and contexts, we have an order of operations, and we need to connect these concepts logically. All right, so now we're going into the world of entrepreneurship. We have 8 core concepts that make up every single business, I believe. And here they are: leadership, finance, operations, growth, product, service, sales, and marketing. Now, the reason why it's important to just lay all of these out is because when most people decide they want to be entrepreneurs, they are not good at all of these things. They don't like all of these things. And they probably got into business, or they want to be an entrepreneur because they have a passion about a specific thing, or maybe one of these areas, and they want to be their own boss, and they think that entrepreneurship is a path to, financial freedom. So, and all those things are true. It's great to be your own boss, and entrepreneurship can absolutely be a path to financial freedom. But what people skip are that you have to be able to do all of these things, right? And this is especially true when you're a solo entrepreneur. Before you have any team, before you have anyone helping you, let's say you don't have a whole lot of working capital, and you're just, kind of through sheer willpower, taking the risk to go out there on your own, whether it's a side hustle or you're actually just, going full on into it. Taking all of these concepts into account and really thoroughly thinking through them and thinking about the right order that they have to flow in is really, really important. And I can at least speak for myself. I made a tremendous number of mistakes, specifically in the finance concept. And it looks like from that poll result that finance is a big thing that keeps you all up at night. So we're going to spend a little bit of time digging in there specifically. All right. So now I'm going to go through each of the concepts, explaining what the purpose of it is, and then also giving you just a couple of examples of the things that fall into that specific concept. All right, so we have to start with leadership. Leadership is the most important part of a business. Even if you're all by yourself, you have to lead yourself. Every single day, you have to, organize how you're going to spend your time. You have to be disciplined. You have to have a list of things you're going to get done. You have to get those things done, right? So leadership starts with yourself, and then both through the example you set for your team, but also through the way that you encourage and build up your team, you have to create a culture in which your business can thrive. This is a very, very difficult thing to do. Most people are very critical of leadership, and that's fair because it really is the most important part of any business. So when we think about some of the things that fit into the leadership concept, we think about things like, what is the vision of the leader for the business? What are the values by which the leader leads the business and also encourages the rest of the people in the business to live and work by? What is the purpose of the business? What is the business's niche? How is management run inside of the business? How does communication work inside of the business? How is decision-making handled inside of the business? All of these things fit into this bucket of leadership, and there are more things that fit into this bucket of leadership. But these are the things that, as an entrepreneur, if you're going to be the CEO, you have to be thinking and working on these things. And I'll just skip to the end on this particular concept. This is the one thing you can never, ever delegate away. Right? If you're going to continue to be the CEO, you really have to continue to focus on these core aspects of this concept. Moving to finance. Finance is about ensuring the sustainability of the business, right? So if there is no profit, then the business is in trouble. And this is definitely not a fun environment to try to get capital, whether through loans with super high interest rates or through the venture capital window, which has significantly shut down over the last 9 to 12 months. So finance is really, really important to spend a lot of time focusing on. Some of the core areas inside of this concept: your revenue, your expenses, your profit, and then things that sort of more fall on your balance sheet: your assets, your liabilities, your capital, and of course, your taxes. Taxes was a huge blind spot for me for a very, very long time. I did not understand the importance of paying my taxes quarterly and would get surprised at the end of the year, thus making me think I had a profit and then finding out I did not have a profit. So really being able to lay out your financial model. And your partner in this is your accountant at first. If you are a solo entrepreneur, making sure that you have an accountant who can at least navigate the tax codes for you and make sure that you understand which things are allowable business expenses. Those are really, really important things to have a solid handle on. Next area we're going to dig into is operations. Operations is about minimizing the risk in your business. So the minute you decide you want to do a business, you have entered the game of increased risk in your life. It's just you're liable for things the minute you decide you want to be in business. And this starts from, do you have a business license? Are you registered with the Secretary of State? And I'm focusing on sort of the things in the United States, but wherever you are in the world, there's going to be things that your state, whether it be city, state, or nation, are going to require you to do from a paperwork perspective, from a compliance perspective. Those are all things that you have to do. So what is going to be the form of your company? How does that form of company protect you from a liability perspective in a court of law? Do you have appropriate insurance for your business? Are your contracts set up correctly? How are you handling human resources with all of your employees? What are your processes? What technology are you leveraging? How are you measuring the performance in the business? These are all things that fit into the operations bucket. They're kind of boring things, but they must be done because you have to minimize the risk in your business. It would be a terrible thing for you to do incredibly well from a revenue perspective, but then, get fined, get sued, or any of these kind of things and not have the proper protections in place. So operations, really, really fundamental part of the business. And I would say, as the accountant is to the finance area of your business, legal counsel is to your operations part of your business, legal counsel and a good insurance broker. Okay, growth, optimizing your business. So growth doesn't always mean getting more revenue. What growth refers to is the fact that the market is dynamic. and you constantly have to be optimizing the way that your business operates. So what that means is that, let's say you've been operating for 5 years and things are going really, really well. If you're not assessing what threats and opportunities exist out there for you because of the changing landscape, whether it be the changing regulatory landscape, whether it be new technology that's coming out, whether it be, what's happening in the greater financial world, is there a banking crisis going on? Are interest rates going up? Is the market getting flooded with new competition? These are all things you have to focus on, and you cannot only be focused on delivering value for your customers. You have to have this market view and constantly be thinking about how you're going to continue to operate your business with a growth mindset. So reinvesting a certain portion of your resources, anticipating and developing a point of view about the market, having an innovation practice, and accepting change, and not just being on the receiving end of change, but trying your best to drive change. These are the kind of things that a growth mindset encompasses, and is really, really important, because one thing we've seen over the last 20 years, especially as the internet has become the dominant platform for business, is that those businesses that do not have a growth mindset can very, very easily become prey in a world full of predators. So this is a very, very important concept. And I want to reiterate, it does not mean just growing revenue. It means having a growth mindset and understanding that the business world is dynamic, not static. Okay, fifth, product. This is one I want to try to distill down to its most simple term, because product has evolved, especially in the world of Silicon Valley, to mean many, many things. But I want us to think about it simply as producing a predictable unit of value. Okay. So understand, when you have a customer, your customer wants to exchange money for value, and what they're exchanging a certain amount of money for a certain amount of value. And it's your job to package that certain amount of value into a product. That value needs to be predictable. Every single time it needs to deliver the value, right? And so you do that through strong research and development, design and production, quality control, making your pricing really well, distribution, and many other things that fall into the product category. But this whole discipline of product really has been elevated, I think, a lot through Silicon Valley, as people have realized having more inputs and feedback loops from customers, and really thinking about what the future of a software product is going to look like is critical to the long-term viability of a business. That is true, but I want us to be thinking about a product specifically as that core unit of value that you are focused on delivering to the customer, and delivering it at scale. So you have to think about how you're going to afford to deliver it, and you have to think about how you're going to price it such that you've got an appropriate profit to continue to grow your business. Service. Okay, I like to separate service from product, even if you are in a services style business, okay? Because as I said, anytime the customer is exchanging money for value, we want to try to err on the side of thinking like a product and not like a service, because that drives us to think about being predictable in delivering that value. And it forces us to be even sharper in the way that we package what we're offering and the way that we produce what we're offering, right? Even if what we're offering is a service. I'll give you just an example. We've seen many, many worlds where craftspeople have offered services and have for a very long time resisted making their service into a product that customers can appreciate. And that may be fine for whatever period of time they're in at that moment. But again, back to that growth mindset, when things like 99 Designs came out, it significantly impacted the graphic design world. Why? Because there were graphic designers, around the world who were willing to frame up their offering into a fixed price. And it kind of really impaired the ability of many designers to just say, hey, you're just going to pay me for the number of hours that I spend on this, and because I'm a craftsperson, and that's kind of what it's worth. When people, think about it from the perspective of the customer is trying to have a budget for how much they're going to spend on all these different aspects of what they need to build their business. And so we want to even think about service offerings, if it's what we're exchanging value for, as a product. When we talk about service and the core concept, now we're talking about maximizing customer satisfaction. Why? Because things go wrong and things fall apart, right? You have to just expect that, your predictable unit of value will not always be what you predicted. It just won't. Let's say it is 90% of the time. You need service to deliver and make sure the customer is satisfied in the 10% of the times when the product doesn't deliver. Okay. So service is about making sure that you are there to fix what goes wrong. Most of the time, you can really keep a customer for life, not based on the product, but based on how you fix something when it goes wrong. Because there's, quite frankly, a very low bar out there for fixing things when they go wrong. A guarantee is a great way to provide service to a customer, to ensure that the customer is satisfied. Think about how you feel when you buy something and there's a guarantee, and you know that the manufacturer, that business person will stand behind that guarantee. And no matter what happens, if something goes wrong, they're going to make it right. Right. That's what service is about. And ultimately relationship management. Right. So thinking about the customer as a relationship between the business and themselves, and not just a transactional thing. So service is really about maximizing customer satisfaction. Sales. Once we've done all of those other things correctly, sales is a very, very focused and actually transactional thing, right? So sales is about generating revenue. And because we now have this world of the internet, we know sales can happen in many, many different ways. So sales can be it's when you're thinking about sales, you're thinking about what is the point of sale, what is the method of sale, and then what is the model for selling. So if you're selling something that, let's just say it's, sub $1,000, you very likely could just sell that in some transactional website, and many people are okay with that. Usually once you get sort of above that threshold, somebody wants to talk to somebody wants to touch and feel something. So we start to get more into a high touch, high value sale that may require multiple touch points to get the sale across the line. But sales is ultimately just about actually generating revenue, getting revenue in the door. And so optimizing that process of what is your point of sale, what is your method of selling, and what is your model for selling. That's all you need to do to be effective at sales, if you've done everything else that we've already talked about correctly. And then the final thing, this is my personal favorite, is marketing. And marketing is about identifying and generating demand, getting people to be attracted to your brand, right? So you can have all those other things, but if nobody knows you exist and nobody knows you've got the perfect product to solve their problem, you will generate no sales, you will generate no revenue. So you must have marketing. The purpose of that is to identify and generate demand. And what are the things that fall into marketing? Your brand falls into marketing. Your reach, what content you're producing, what channels you're driving that content through, right? So most people are kind of familiar with marketing because it's become a very, very popular thing in the internet era. All right, so those are the 8 concepts. If there's something that I missed, let me know. But I think for the most part, that really covers what every single business needs to be thinking about. So now let's think about the contexts of those concepts. And there are only 2. The first one is inside the building. So your company focus. And I'd say the first 4 concepts really are what I call the inside the building concepts. So leadership, finance, operations, and growth. Those are the things that you're really hardening when you're thinking about your internal company dynamics and how strong and how high performing and how healthy your company is. So these are kind of the 4 things you want to have really, really solid inside the building. Then outside the building, right, that customer focus. Now we're talking about the product, service, sales, and marketing, right? These are things that are very customer focused concepts. So I talked about the order of operations. I talked about not wanting to wire a house once you've already shut all the drywall, right? There is an order and a set of logical connections to these concepts as well, all right? And there'll be no surprise here. They're actually in the order that I walked through them with you. So the priority order starts with leadership, then goes to finance, operations, growth, product, service, sales, and marketing. So a couple of things about this. First, it's more important to have your internal house in order than to have your customer house in order, right? That from a priority perspective, your internal house is what actually enables you to deliver that customer satisfaction, okay? So the inside the building concepts from a contextual perspective are more important than the customer focused ones. Second, you see marketing is sort of at the bottom and leadership is at the top. In this priority order, and actually I want to focus on finance, but in this priority order, you should look at this and sort of say, where are you? What is the thing you love to do, right? You might be a product person, you might be a salesperson, you might be a marketing person, you may even be a finance person. But I would just say most entrepreneurs who I've met are not finance people. And I would also say many have not really taken leadership as its own discipline very seriously. Most people tend to be on the customer focused side of the house. And so the reason for establishing this framework is to really anchor people in how important it is to have your internal house in order before you start trying to gin up a bunch of business. And also to say right after leadership, finance is the next most important thing, because it's so hard and it's so esoteric to so many of us who didn't go to school to get a CPA or any of those kinds of things. But if you don't have your finance house in order, you have no sustainability of your business, right? The fastest way to go out of business is to not make a profit. The fastest way to go out of business is to run out of money. So this is the order. And whenever I've seen sort of organizations get upside down, it's because their order was a little bit upside down. So the lower the priority doesn't mean that it doesn't actually encompass less. It actually encompasses more. So let me explain what I mean. There's this concept in software development called inheritance. And that means you write this small amount of code, and it's so important that all these other parts of the software will use it, right? It's like a component, and everything else will just use it because it's so incredibly valuable. You wouldn't want to write that code again. Leadership is that code. Leadership is the most important thing to your business, and it has to be present in every other aspect of your business, right? So as we continue to go down the concepts, what you'll see is that at the bottom, marketing includes everything. And it kind of makes sense, because if marketing is the concept that engages the customer, identifies and generates demand, think about it this way. If your marketer is engaging with a prospect for the very first time, and the prospect starts to have questions, marketing needs to be able to answer those questions efficiently, right? Very, very quickly. Any question that the prospect would have that could reasonably be answered about the sales process, the service guarantees, the product, who's in leadership, how well the company is financed. Marketing needs to be able to answer all of those things, right? And so that's why when you look at the order, as it goes lower in priority, it actually gets more comprehensive in terms of its embodiment of the previous concepts, right? If you talk to most CFOs, they're very, very focused on a couple of things. What does the CEO want, and how do I keep the business, sustainable? They don't really have to be thinking about, what the service. They just need to know what service costs, right? They just need to know what marketing costs, but they really need to know the tax code. Okay, so in my practical experience with business, I've seen this play out again and again and again and again and again. That as you go down in this priority list, you get more comprehensive in terms of the inclusion of the previous concepts. And then as you grow your business, it will take a team to cover all these concepts. So if you happen to be successful, you're starting as an individual, but then eventually you are, you're knocking it out of the park, you're growing a team. This is what your team will look like relative to the concepts. So obviously your leadership, you'll have the CEO, you'll probably have a board, and then an overall leadership team. Finance will be headed by a CFO. They'll have a bookkeeper, accountant, controller, et cetera. Operations will be your COO, your lawyer, your insurance broker, project managers, maybe your CIO rolls into operations. Growth, you've probably seen the rise of this new title called Chief Strategy Officer. I'm actually the head of strategy for Jumpstart Health Investors. That's what this is about. Always looking over the horizon, looking at the dynamics in the market, thinking about where our opportunities are, where our threats are, where we need to zig or zag. That's kind of that growth thing. And it's now been enshrined into a title called Chief Strategy Officer. Product. So the chief product officer is another, important rising role that we're seeing, but also chief technology officers, your product development team, manufacturer, fulfillment, et cetera. Service, you've seen the rise of the chief customer officer, the help desk, the call center, sales, chief revenue officer, the sales team, et cetera, and marketing, the chief marketing officer, marketing team, their agency, et cetera. So in a fully blown out business, this is how the team reflects the different concepts in the business. So whether you're starting a business or investing in a company, or let's just say, you want to be a more entrepreneurial minded employee, which as a boss, I would say I love the entrepreneurial minded employees, because they're not just thinking about their one area, they're thinking comprehensively about the business and thinking about how what they contribute impacts the rest of the business. Understanding the 8 core concepts will give you an edge. And I hope that it's simple enough that just, listening to me talk about it today for 30 minutes gave you a basic understanding of how it actually works. I did write a book that you can get on Amazon, and it's also an audiobook version on Audible that goes into much more detail about all of this. And I definitely, if you liked what you heard today and you feel like this framework could be helpful to you, then I would say grab a copy of the book. It's not very expensive, and it goes into much more detail in the 8 core concepts. But I have found it to be an incredibly valuable framework that I use every day across all the businesses that I'm involved in, regardless of the role. And I'm always able to piece apart the areas of the business that are strong and the areas of the business that really need help. So that's it. You can find me online pretty much everywhere at Marcus Whitney. And thank you for your time.
Marcus, thank you so much for such an incredible overview. As a visual learner myself, I really appreciate the way that you lay out all of the concepts and connect them. So thank you. And let's just jump right into this discussion. So, you mentioned a couple examples, like having your priorities upside down, but thinking about your personal business journey and some of the other businesses that you've worked with, what are some of the other common challenges that entrepreneurs, especially those who might be early on in their business journey, that they might face when trying to balance strategic planning with day-to-day operations?
So I think when you do not have experience, you don't really know how to effectively estimate time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when you're not able to estimate time effectively, then you can't set good expectations even for yourself. And so often you will get frustrated when things take longer than you would like them to take, when that's just how long they actually take, right? So building a business takes a long time. It's a get rich slow scheme. That's what entrepreneurship is, right? It's a get rich slow scheme. And so what I find is that most entrepreneurs who are inexperienced, and this was certainly true for myself, they just lack the experience to be able to size something up.
Sure.
And I don't really know how to get around that, except have a mentor who has been where you want to be and listen to that person, right? And that's where you're getting into the specifics of the kind of business that you're launching. And that's an area that I think the 8 core concepts can't actually help you. It can't help you, size up a specific key activity in your type of business, right? You need someone who's been in your type of business to say, oh yeah, let's say you want to be a real estate developer here in Nashville, Tennessee, right? You need someone who's actively doing it to say, I don't care what the website says, actually getting a permit for codes is going to take like 3 times longer than it says on the website. Like, if you don't have someone who's got that insight, you're depending on the website, right? You're going to be really upset and disappointed because your expectations are not realistic.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love the emphasis on kind of, opening your mind out to those people who are, experts in those areas, and also just the emphasis on patience. I think it can be really easy to get into that mindset of like, oh, I have to take advantage of like the moment right now. It's the right timing. We have the right infrastructure in place. and that can cause, decision making that isn't, taking everything into account. So, really stepping back and accepting that long journey ahead can be really honestly helpful and peaceful in a way.
Can I say one thing about that?
Yeah.
So this gets into one thing that I am always trying to share with newer entrepreneurs.
Mm-hmm.
I started with the analogy of a house.
Okay? Yeah.
Being an entrepreneur, a lot of people like to talk down about entrepreneurs and, you're putting an entrepreneur on your LinkedIn, what is that? That's not a real job, whatever. It actually is a real job. We are craft people.
Yeah.
And it's a career.
Mm-hmm.
And like any craft, you get better the longer you do it.
Totally.
And the length of time you do it is almost certainly not going to be in one venture.
Yeah.
It is almost certainly going to be in multiple ventures. So if you want to become a great entrepreneur, you really can't quit after the first one.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be willing to take that first one as an entire level up learning lesson, whether you won or lost, whether it went well or it didn't go well.
Mm-hmm.
You still were not very good in your first one.
Right.
You still were not very good.
Totally. And you're going to take those learning experiences and bring those into those new ventures. And, there will still be bumps along the road, but you're working with more information, you're working with more experience, and you've grown that network and that makes a difference. I love it.
Totally.
Awesome. So just to jump around a bit, are there any kind of indicators or benchmarks that founders should look out for as they're kind of working to develop a deeper understanding of the strengths and weaknesses, not only of their business, but of themselves as leaders?
Well, I would, to me, the order is the right order to go in, and I wouldn't skip steps, right? So when you're starting a business, if you don't have to rush out there and start spending any money, spend a lot of time in the leadership portion. Spend a lot of time like getting really, really clear. What is your vision for this? What values do you want to operate this thing by? What was the purpose? What niche market are you going after? How do you want to operate? Do you want a lot of employees? Do you not want a lot of employees? Like spend a lot of time there. Okay. Because the more time you spend there, once you move to finance, your ability to answer the questions that are necessary to build out a financial model will largely have been answered in the leadership section. Okay. Even down to how much you want to spend on customer satisfaction, right? You answer those questions in your definition of what kind of company you want to be as from a leader position. Yeah. So spend a lot of time before you start going out and building something and selling it or whatever. Spend a lot of time in that leadership piece, and it helps you with each next step, and having a super solid financial model really helps you with how you're going to establish your operations and so forth. So I would say moving through the priority order of the concepts and in a thorough, slower way than you would want to. It's like go slow to go fast. That will actually really, really tighten up any potential issues you'll run into later.
Right. I really love that it kind of comes back to that priority order, because it gives entrepreneurs kind of like a base point to start to ask themselves those questions, like I think when you're asking yourself, oh, like, what are my strong points? What are my weak points? It's like, where do I even begin to kind of like think about what's important, what's not, like, where should I be choosing to spend my time, my resources, my funds, whatever it is. And this framework just gives, that sense of direction for us as entrepreneurs. So it's beautiful. I love it. And so once these weak points are kind of identified, what are some ways that entrepreneurs can effectively fill those gaps and ultimately avoid failure in those areas?
So as you're going through the concepts, that's a really great time to have reflection, right? About what things like, and look, in the beginning, I expect most people to not be very good at any of the things, quite
Sure.
frankly. But as you're going through it and you're learning about it, you might find, oh, I actually like this financial modeling stuff,
Right.
and you may not have even known that,
Yeah.
but pay attention to what parts of the process you like, which parts of the process you don't like. And as you start actually engaging with other people and with customers, et cetera, pay attention to which parts you're actually good at and which, do not be defensive, be
Sure.
really, really open to taking feedback. But your job is to try to be a really, really shrewd assessor of yourself against the concepts, because what you want to do is find out the priority order in which you need to fire yourself. Okay, this is the most important thing. What is the very first area in here that I gotta get myself out of? Okay, and so that's why that shrewd self-assessment is so important. Later on in life, there's also sort of a bit of an age thing about this, because it just naturally, as you get older, you generally, not 100% of the time, but you generally get more just confident, and you care less about what other people think, and you're
Right.
less insecure. You're less feeling like you need to prove something to somebody. So I think this is a lot easier for people who are entrepreneurs starting maybe in their 40s as opposed to their 20s, because in your 40s, you're like, I'm not trying to work that hard, and I'm not trying to, like you just have a little bit more self-awareness. When you're in 20s, it's a little bit harder, because you're just in a stage of your life where you can try your best to be super self-aware. But I mean, we've all been there, and the 20s are hard. You're really, trying to prove
Totally.
yourself. It's, it's just really tough. But I think regardless, you need to try to be self-aware. As you add more and more people to your team, one of the most important aspects of leadership is self-awareness, because everyone can kind of tell whether
Right.
or not you know who you are or you don't.
Totally.
You know.
Yeah. No, I love that. And it kind of just sparked a quick follow-up question of like, in thinking about like, yes, for certain people, it might be easier because of their confidence to like recognize maybe certain weaknesses. So would you say that there are any like common blind spots that entrepreneurs tend to overlook when they're assessing their weaknesses of their business or of themselves as leaders?
So most, not all, but most entrepreneurs start a business because they're passionate about something. It could be they're passionate about the problem because they personally experienced the problem. So I'm in the healthcare space. A lot of our founders had a personal experience, and it may have been themselves as a patient. It could have been a loved one as a patient. And that personal experience becomes the purpose for the company. But it's like, it's a passion that can at times be blinding, right? To market realities. And so one of the most common self imposed setbacks that entrepreneurs suffer is an unwillingness to respect the market, an unwillingness to respect a massive shift that's happening in the market. In my space as a venture investor, we see it a lot with valuations. The pendulum swings back and forth between who's in the driver's seat, who's got the leverage. Is it founders or is it investors, right? And the pendulum will keep swinging. Right now, investors are in the driver's seat. Investors have in 2021, founders had all the leverage, right? And as that pendulum swings, it's kind of difficult to admit it's swung, right? And to recalibrate and to write down the value of your own company so that you can get that next round of capital that you need. So, that's the capital markets, but there's also the customer markets. There's the competitive aspects of the markets, et cetera, et cetera. So I would say, that's the hard part, and that one gets a lot of people, because when they set a goal and they put, they kind of put their annual budget for next year down, and they say, we're going to get this amount of revenue because we're going to keep everyone on staff, and we're going to make this amount of profit. And they say all these things, and look, you have to shoot for something.
Totally.
But like over time, the market will have its say.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The market will have its say. And are you listening or not? The earlier you listen, the better you can adjust.
Totally. Absolutely. And I think that kind of just brings it back to, remaining adaptable and agile through all of these ups and downs and uncertainties of growing a business and the everyday motions that come with that. So I love that emphasis. So just to bring in a little bit of the live Q&A at this moment.
Yeah, great.
To elaborate a little bit, just to give people a better idea of like, maybe like for aspiring entrepreneurs, especially like of the idea of like the time that it would take to bring a business concept to fruition, like, launch a product or service, like just kind of like a high level overview.
I mean, what kind of business, where, with what resources?
Yep.
Is it a side hustle? Is it a full-time thing?
Mm-hmm. But these are important questions to ask yourself. Absolutely. Like as you're thinking about this concept.
Yeah. I mean, it would be very misleading for me to try to offer an average.
Totally.
Given all of those variables, right, that I just laid out. So rather than asking what's the average time, the first thing is to assess, okay, what's your situation? So first of all, is it a side hustle, or is it, are you putting full time into it? Because obviously, the amount of time it's going to take to get it live is going to have a lot to do with how much time you can actually put into it. Okay. And then the next thing is, how capital intensive is this particular business, right? So for example, if you want to start, let's say you want to start a copywriting agency, you can launch that this afternoon. Go to GoDaddy, buy a domain, go to Squarespace, throw up a site, go get ChatGPT Plus, set up your LinkedIn, go to Fiverr, get a logo, and start marketing. I mean, so how capital intensive is your business? I mean, you can move as fast as you want to move. Again, the speed of getting up and running is not as important as how much time should it take to do your particular form of business well.
Yeah. No, this is a great answer. And I love that you're kind of answering it with more questions, because I think that this is a great way for this entrepreneur and others to kind of think like about their own offering, their own vision, what they kind of have at the moment, and what's viable. So I love it. So kind of, staying on the point that we were talking about of the strength and weaknesses, are there any kind of risks or challenges that entrepreneurs should be aware of when they're looking to fill gaps in their business or leadership through like external support networks, whether it's through like contracting, or like, a partnership, that kind of thing?
Yeah. So the very first things, and I didn't do this when I first started, my business, but my first business. Now I don't do anything without this.
Sure.
The very first things are, you really should have a CPA, because you want them to set up your chart of accounts and get you kind of all set up on QuickBooks or Wave, or pick your accounting system, right? Those are two relatively inexpensive ones. Xero is another one. But you need a CPA to kind of set up your chart of accounts, kind of make sure you're straight on. And if they're a good CPA, they will also make sure you're straight on all your filings in the state where you are. So let's just take sort of the United States. I live in Tennessee. You have to set up with labor and workforce. Okay, you need a number that's got to be factored into your systems, even if you're a solo entrepreneur. You need your business license. If you're doing an LLC, you got to do your annual report with the Secretary of State. Okay. A good CPA will have that checklist and be like, okay, do this, do this, do this, do this. You have
Right.
your EIN, blah, blah, blah. So that's one really, really important person.
Sure.
Then I would say that the next one is an insurance broker, just to make sure you've got your general liability insurance at a minimum. At a minimum, you probably need more forms of insurance, but at a minimum, you'll need your general liability. So you need that person. And then you're probably going to need counsel that can help you get your articles of incorporation, your operating agreement, and whatever baseline contracts you're going to have for your business. Like, because every business needs some form of contract.
Totally.
And so those are kind of the three people.
Sure. Yeah.
To get your internal house in order. And it's very, very difficult to do it without them. Now you can, try to do this through online services. There are like online bookkeeping services, but I would say they generally fall short on a lot of the compliance things. And there is like LegalZoom and things like that. And I understand not everyone has capital to hire a counsel. So I want to be respectful of all that kind of stuff. But these are really, really important things that have to be done so that your house is in order, and that when you go out and you operate, you can pretty much know you're not going to fall afoul of the IRS, of your state when it comes to paying all your important taxes. And if you get sued, you will have the most basic level of protections in place. So those are kind of, you must have those things, I believe.
Right. And I do find it interesting that all of those kind of must-haves fall under that internal realm of the framework, as that kind of takes priority in the way of thinking. And so as entrepreneurs are kind of thinking about, like, where am I going to put my time? Where am I going to put my resources? And in a potential external party, that's an important way to think about it. So that's great. I think we have time for maybe one more question. So you touched on kind of in talking about growth, how the market is like more dynamic and the importance of being prepared for the ever-changing business landscape. So are there any kind of strategies or approaches you suggest that founders can adopt to proactively navigate that and stay informed to anticipate any potential challenges?
Yes. Take the time that you may be spending on Facebook or TikTok or whatever, and replace that with one or two podcasts that are focused on your industry, and that are highly rated, highly listened to. And that's kind of a good start, quite frankly. I would say podcasts have really become an incredible tool for entrepreneurs to stay up to date on current events in their specific industry. Because there are things you can listen to when you're in the car, when you're doing a commute.
Sure.
It's a way to leverage time that previously would not have been leverageable.
That's such a good point. Yeah, I love that.
You know what I mean? And so I would just say, decrease a little bit of your social media time and replace that with some good focused podcast time. So it's not Joe Rogan, find a specific podcast in your industry that is, well listened to. And it's not going to have the kind of ratings that Joe Rogan's going to have, because it's going to be focused on your industry, right?
Sure.
But that's fine. Focus on that and just kind of get smart. I love this question because I think most people would be surprised at how much time I spend trying to stay up to speed on everything.
Right.
It's an incredible amount of time. But it's a real differentiator. The more the more powerful you will be in your decision making, in your thoughtfulness about what kind of product you should launch, and the ways you can save money in delivering a product. There's tremendous ROI on continuing to educate yourself.
Yeah, amazing. Marcus, if you had one piece of wisdom, something from this conversation, presentation, or just that you carry with you through your business journey to leave with the audience, what would that be?
I'll just throw one thing that we haven't talked about at all, which is the importance of taking care of yourself physically. So entrepreneurship is marathon, not a sprint, and you need good sleep, and you need to stay hydrated, and you need to eat well. And if you are able-bodied, you should sweat. And you should commit, you should commit time to doing that. It will help your brain work better. It will help you process and relieve a lot of the stress that entrepreneurship brings on you. And so I'm a big believer in the importance of entrepreneurs taking care of themselves. We went through kind of an era where entrepreneurship was very, very tied to hustle culture. And there was implications of you don't need to sleep. You can sleep when you're dead, all these kinds of weird, stupid things. Listen, a well-rested brain makes better decisions. A well-rested brain is kinder to employees and customers. And so, taking care of yourself is taking care of your business, full stop. So that's probably the one thing. We didn't talk about it at all, but I think it's super, super important. And that would be my final note.
Awesome. Marcus, thank you so much for such an incredible overview and sharing these amazing insights on behalf of the NASDAQ Entrepreneurial Center and everyone here today. We are sincerely grateful for you joining us.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. Have a good one, everyone.
Awesome. And to our audience, we would love for you to join us for upcoming webinars, which you can view by using the upcoming events link in the chat. So thank you all so much for joining us today. We look forward to welcoming you back online with us soon.